Hey, you beautiful being. Welcome to Empowered Human with Nina Garcia. I am your host, and we will be exploring some more growth oriented things for you today, answering the question: how do we put the human back in human performance? We have a very special guest, Vanessa Broers, here to help us answer that question and explore that territory today, because the answer, in short, is this: how do we put the human back in human performance? You gotta know how to deal with your feelings. That's right, you are not a robot. I am not a robot. We are human. And so that is what we're going to be exploring today. If that sounds like it is up your alley and the thing that you are wanting to lean into and explore, go ahead and grab a journal or a really good friend to dialogue with about what comes up for you in today's episode. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, it's got a lot of energy. We really vibed. It is a playful way, as you all know, a very playful way to lean into uncomfortable territory. And so that is what we are going to be doing. Go ahead and grab that journal or that really good friend, because for now, you know, I am so curious. Are you ready to play? Welcome to Empowered Human, the dramatically playful podcast that invites you to heal humanity, the one within you, me, and the world at large. I'm your host, drama therapist, empowerment specialist, and not to mention empowered human, Nina Garcia, and I'm so stoked you're joining me on the journey. Every Wednesday, you are invited to explore transforming from powered to empowered with genuinely human stories of courageous existence, healing from invalidation, and truly belonging to you. So wherever you are on the spectrum, from empowerment curious to empowered human ambassador, this podcast is designed to humanize. Get ready to lean into your edge, heal your worldview, and finally belong to you. This is Empowered Human. And now, let's take a breath. However it is, for my listeners out there, get your body involved if you need to. We're definitely going to be exploring your feelings in your body and your relationship to them, as we have our special guest, Vanessa Broers, here with us. How you doing, Vanessa?
Oh, good. I'm like giggling like a little girl in a classroom who's going to get kicked out by your teacher, but I'm ready to go.
The good news is there's no teachers here, so we won't get kicked out. I love it.
That's right. We own this space.
That's right. Oh, there's a whole episode we'll be doing next month. Stay tuned, folks. That said, before we go into anything, y'all, the energy you can already tell is live. Me and Vanessa, we're already vibing before we hit record. There's been a lot of laughter, a lot of exploratory moments already. Hoping we're going to bring some and all of this back for you, and some new things too. But we just took our breath. Let's talk about consent. You don't have to listen to this episode if y'all don't want to, right? But if you do, here's what's going to happen. Vanessa and I are already we're saying we consent to go into this potentially scary, potentially uncomfortable space, because we want to lean in. We want to go that direction, get ourselves the skills and the tools that we need to be able to feel a little bit more courageous with that. Vanessa, how are you feeling about that?
Excellent. Yeah, I love this. I mean, the scarier, the more I'm interested. That's typically how I roll.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So that is what we're going to be leaning into. Let's keep going. If you could just introduce yourself, Vanessa, what makes you an empowered human, and how would you define an empowered human?
I work a lot with power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People often describe me as very powerful. And the way that I would describe what it means to be an empowered human is twofold, actually. One is the amount of your wholeness that you have reclaimed.
Mm. The amount of wholeness that has been reclaimed.
So if you think about every time you've been hurt or wounded or retracted or contracted or diminished yourself, contorted in some way, I imagine those like these little fractal pieces of you that split off. And every time a piece of you splits off, some of your power isn't accessible. So when we heal, we pull those parts back in, we reintegrate them, There's
Mm.
more of us available, which makes us more powerful.
I love this. Audience out there, you know, some of the language that sounds similar to this is we use own your truth. How do you own your truth and take it back? That's yours. And the stuff that's not yours, how do you get rid of that? Mm,
Amen. That would be another one I wasn't going to talk about, but yes.
mm,
And the other is how much actual life force, spiritual soul energy can you move through your body? This
mm,
very practically nervous system training. How much tension can you hold, both positive and negative? How much, this isn't about becoming superwoman. How much stress can you take on? That's not what I mean. You know, we're conduits in this meat suit that we chose to come into. And how much actual spiritual life force energy can we move without it frying us and shutting us down and having us collapse is another marker for power that I like to play with.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to bring this back to our audience because I've referenced something similar to this here. We call it like emotional bench pressing, like how
Mhm.
to like be familiar with the ability to funnel and move things through you. If you have never picked it up and played with it and moved it through, how do you build those emotional muscles so that you can be that conduit, so that you can say, oh, I'm not all over the right. I've got the right boundaries that I need for me, right? Everybody's got different things that they need for themselves, right? And that ability to take in things that may be uncomfortable and move it through, even if it's uncomfortable, so that it can ease on down the road, so to speak, right? We don't want to hold on to everything all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I imagine that many of the people who are listening to this have probably experienced varying degrees of trauma and emotional challenges in their life. And that reduces our capacity to flow that energy because our nervous systems are always activated by the emotional patterns that we experienced in the past. And as we heal those, there's this other experience that we're invited into where we actually re-immerse ourselves in nervous system activation, but for positive growth. A friend and I often talk about the difference between healing and expansion. And
Could you educate us?
yeah, they're actually quite. Oh, my earring just fell out. I'm getting hot in here.
Much power.
Too much power is shooting right on my head. So healing for a lot of in the way that I work with it really is about, again, reclaiming that wholeness, but not being so triggered by everything all the time, becoming untriggerable, right?
Mm,
But that's often because something that we're doing is triggering some past experience that was uncomfortable. But expansion has almost a similar physiology to it, where you're pushing yourself beyond who you've been before. It doesn't necessarily have to trigger some past trauma response, but to the body, it can feel similar. And if we spend too much time in healing without letting us go into the fear of expansion, we can end up what I call a transformation healing loop.
oh my.
But simultaneously, if you push yourself into expansion before you've actually done the healing where you can sustain the nervous system activation of expansion, you end up sort of in that what I would call entrepreneurial or human ping pong, where you just can't quite seem to
No.
vibrate to become bigger.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So as a therapist, what I will often speak with people about is when you're in the healing phase, it's like getting your power back, right? The past has kept pulling you and pulling you into this story. And you're like, no, I'd really like to be here in the present. I would like the power enough to be in the present, right? And I say it's like little p power, like you get your power back, right? But to really say I want to expand is like now we're saying I want to empower myself to be able to do more beyond just my internal world, outside of myself, with my community, maybe with the world at large, maybe just with friends, right? But it's beyond, it is more expansive. So this is that move from that healing to expansion, power to empowered. I love this. Okay.
Yeah, that is great. Holy moly, I love that.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much for being willing to just even like these little bits. Y'all know I always ask you prior to the recording with my guests, get out your journals, right? There's so many good little nuggets that we've already written down. I hope you wrote down healing versus expansion. What space are you in? I hope you're asking yourself, right? Am I space of healing, a space of expansion? And furthermore, here's what we're going to be exploring because Vanessa, the question that we set out to explore with you is how can we put the human back in human performance, right? And just to say, when I first hear this question, my thing is like, So what kind of performance are we talking about here, right? We're talking about work performance, relational performance, intimate performance, interpersonal performance, right? Like what kind of performance here? And then when I think about where so many people working with me struggle with their humanity is, it's the emotional part. It's the reality that like we're not robots, right? We have emotions, and if we haven't been given the skills to use them, like we can't be an emotional Jedi in our own life. We don't know how to wield it, right? So the question over to you, right? Just how can we put the human back in human performance? What does that mean to you? What's going on?
It's a great question. And actually, this question tortured me for ever. When you said what kind of performance, I'm like, I don't know. Am I a healer? Am I a coach? I have no idea. I'm like tricking my clients because they come to me to make money, but we start doing soul retrievals.
Who am I? What do I do exactly? Yes.
Exactly. So I will say that the majority of the people that I work with are coming to me for some professional performance challenges or goals. And I will also add that I have yet to work with a human being where we don't also talk about relationship performance, sexual performance, intimate performance, money management. I mean, it's everything. And this is in part of the answer to the question.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are you not a robot, but you take you everywhere you go.
Mm.
So if you only, I mean, imagine if you had a group of friends and only some of you were allowed to go some places, what would happen to that group of friends? What would happen to that community? It probably wouldn't feel very cohesive. It probably wouldn't have a lot of teamwork and shared resources. Over time, people would get jealous, people would leave, arguments and conflict would break out.
Mm-hmm.
We are walking around doing this to the inner parts of us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
This part of Vanessa's allowed at work, that part of Vanessa's not. This part of Vanessa works at work, this part of Vanessa destroys her relationship.
Mm.
So when we stop thinking about ourselves as a whole human that comes everywhere with us,
Yeah.
we leave parts of us out and it breaks down performance everywhere. So for years and years, I prided myself on being this strong, independent woman who's a badass at work and doesn't need anyone, and then wondered why I had no intimacy with my husband.
Mm.
And so that badass, powerful woman was shutting him down and emasculating him every day, killing the intimacy. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it wasn't even a total, complete advantage at work either.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I mean. That's my shortest answer
Yes.
for what putting the human back in human performance means. And of course, we'll explore it in more depth.
Oh my gosh, I thank you so much for this, right? That short encapsulated in a nutshell, right? Y'all time to write down, take what you can, right, from this exploration right here, this image we've got. When you shared about the reality that, right? So a drama therapist here, I speak in roles and characters, right? I think about the role that you play at work, right? And the role that lives within you that came up at work, right? So you said like the badass woman, right? Badass at work, right? So great for that arena, right? In so much as she could be, right? She was working and effective, at least in that arena. And then it's like she didn't leave the stage, right? Like other parts of you weren't also present there at the table, so to speak, right? So I'm using a lot of metaphor here, but uh, when we think about parts, it's like imagine there's this table and there's all these different parts that are at the table. And some of them have a voice, and some of them maybe we've tried to cut out, and we're like, no, you don't get to exist here. Like, don't be at the table, go to the back room, or like sit on the floor, or go into exactly, right? Like, y'all listeners out there, I know you can see this, but Vanessa's hands just went to her chest, and it's like, just that holding, right? Of this is what we tell ourselves we have to do in order to make it through, is cut out parts of ourselves as if we could, right? As if we were like a surgeon trying to remove. And the reality is, like, these parts all exist within us and we cannot cut them out, right? We can redefine our relationship to them. If I've got my badass, boss babe that's, too loud everywhere else, I need to work on her volume so that she knows it's comfortable and safe for her to turn down when I go home. And then I want to turn up, I don't know, badass wife or badass mom or whatever the case is, right? Whatever the role is that I want to be when I'm in my new arena. But badass worker doesn't go away, right? All of these voices are at the table, but if I don't have flexibility to move between them, right? It's like, right? This is like I get stuck in one or more, right? But I get
Like a
stuck.
robot who goes into a corner and
Does not compute, cannot, right?
well,
So
also, can I add one thing to that?
yes, for sure.
one of the sort of like mental objections that I can feel emerging in my brain, because I hear it all the time, is, but if I let that part of me out, for example, at work or whatever, I'll cry in a meeting and I'll be overly emotional. And or leaders will often reflect, well, I don't want people crying at in my meetings. And we're so afraid of our own emotions and everybody else's, because we're not used to practicing including all of us. And so we don't need to talk about this today, but I just wanted to presence that when you begin this process, it can be a little messy, because those parts that haven't had the mic in a while might be a little over eager and have a lot of energy amped up, and they got some stuff to say, and it may come out, not as cohesive and grounded as desired. And just let that be okay. That's not the end goal, is to just be emotionally dumping and unconsciously unloading everywhere you go. As you navigate this more and more, it's not like all the parts are operating individually. Over time, they become integrated and unified.
I love that you keep using the word integrated, right? The cast of characters, right? The roles, the different parts of us that we have that exist, they exist for a reason. They exist to help us survive in lots of different spaces. And because we cannot cut them out, and it behooves us to redefine this relationship, I love that you also just acknowledge it's a messy process sometimes, right? Parts of it can be super messy. Some parts are going to integrate and they're just going to be like, oh, you heard me? You just know that I needed to be here? Oh, great. And they'll just like pop up at the table and they're good to go. Whereas other parts, but just the honesty, right? They're so human. They had a lot to say. They haven't been heard for months, weeks, years in some cases. They may have a lot to say. And so it behooves us, if we're willing to do this work, to really be able to say, I want to show up as my fullest self, right? I want to show up whole. It behooves us to say, it's going to be okay to let's challenge that perfectionism, because again, we're not robots, and really let's get a little messy. And you don't have to do it alone. In fact, we can do it together, right? I mean, Vanessa, what can you share to us about that experience of whichever part you want to go into, right? When we think about just the humanity of it, the messiness of it, the solutions, right? The different pathways and journeys. I know that we are going to get to, you have a very special resource, Sacred Rage Alchemy. I totally want to talk about that. But like, what are some pathways that you find that people who are like, I'm with you, V, like I want to do this. I want to own my truth. I get it. It's going to be a little messy, but I'm courageous. I'm ready to be an emotional Jedi. How do I do this?
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I mean, Sacred Rage Alchemy is really coming up, and we will get to that. Just rage itself is in the room and wants to be heard. Speaking of voices that want to be heard. The thing that wants to come through is you do it by doing it. And you said something really important, which is you don't have to do it alone. And I would even tweak that to say you're not meant to. And this is not some, personal development, everyone needs to have a coach kind of thing or whatever. I mean, I'm from that world, so that's really there. But your subconscious, your unconscious is invisible to you for a reason.
Ding, ding,
You're
ding.
you're not meant to be able to see everything. And so I meet a lot of people who they're frustrated with themselves, or they feel that they're at a plateau where they've been doing maybe they are even into some really beautiful resources online and they do daily journaling, and yet they find that they're still stuck in similar patterns. And I also find that those people tend to be a little resistant towards bringing on external support, because they may have been let down by it in the past, or they don't fully trust it. And I get all of those things are to be honored, but also explored with curiosity, because there is only so far that you can take yourself. And I tell my clients this all the time. The reason you can't do it by yourself is because you're not supposed to. We are in our bones, in our soul, we are aching. Our hearts are breaking to be back in community, to be back in a tribe. I talk about this a lot with motherhood. I say our cultural motherhood is abusive.
What do you mean by that?
It is absolute pure insanity, the way that we mother in our culture by ourselves. One of my biggest journeys as a mother has been feeling suffocated by my daughter, whom I love more than anything, but if we lived in a tribal setting, she'd have my mom and five sisters to share that maternal bond. Of course, I'm the only mother, but usually women in our culture are the only maternal figure. If you're lucky, you have your mom nearby or a sibling nearby. We don't, and a lot of women don't. So
Mhm.
we're parenting in isolation, and it's not natural to the human animal in us.
Mm. This is, when you share this, I think about my own experience with motherhood and how I wasn't expecting to be a single mother. So now we're a blended family. We got divorced a few years ago when she was in two-ish, maybe at the time. Um, and I think about how I so intensely felt that there was a very particular way that I had to show up as a mother,
Mhm.
that I had to be the one who was there, that I had to be the one who's always there, that I had to make sure that she had things to do and things to see, and that all of right, this such intense of what a mother is, quote unquote, the story, so intense that when my marriage failed, when right I made the choice to leave that marriage, and it was the best decision for all of us, but so intense was that belief that I became suicidal. I had a part of me pop up that became suicidal because I did not know how to exist anymore and still feel like I was a good enough mother, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Like that's how toxic this can become, this narrative, if we're not willing to redefine it. I really had to go into some unfucking comfortable spaces, excuse my language, but some scary, dark, uncomfortable spaces to be able to acknowledge the reality that I could not cut out my rage, right? We're going to talk about it, and my resentment for what I perceived as failure and that I didn't have any control over it, right?
Oh,
So I just, this is such an important conversation, but that's what it makes me think of, is how toxic that can be. I had to redefine my relationship to that, of what it meant to be a mother, so that I could be healthy and show up as a good mother again, 100%.
I feel like we need a second episode all about that.
We may need to. We may need
Yeah.
to. That would be okay, right?
Yeah, it's profound. I mean, a bit of my story and how you do this work was getting pregnant for me was death sentence. I mean, I was so confused because all I felt was shame. I mean, I felt like I did not want to walk around with a pregnant belly. I didn't want people to look at me. Nobody could touch me when I was pregnant. I felt very alien, and I was ashamed about how I felt and confused about how I felt. And I was working with a shaman at the time, and he said to me, Vanessa, this pregnancy is a gift from God because your identity is too small, it's too shallow, and it lacks spiritual depth. And so if you feel like this is destroying your life and ruining everything you've ever created, it's because it is, and it's supposed to. And I was like, oh, so I'm not even gonna be like, it was so painful. But I had to make the choice in that moment that I was going to be willing to feel everything. If I felt ashamed of being a mother, I was going to feel the shame of being a mother. If I felt guilt for the shame, I was going to feel the guilt for the shame. If I felt rage for being betrayed, I was going to feel that. And it was, I had already been in that practice, but this felt higher stakes because there was another life that I knew would be impacted by these choices. But I also knew that should I not choose to feel these things, I was going to be resentful of that life as their mother for the
Mhm.
rest of
Yeah, some part of you would have stayed small, even as you
yeah,
say that in
sure.
deep language.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. And like I said, I had been in that practice for a long time, but it was the really grounding into this decision that I will feel it even if it's uncomfortable. And so often when we allow ourselves from a place of awareness, right? It matters. I wasn't in a place of pure victimhood. Woe is me. I feel so ashamed. It was, I'm going to let myself feel this and I'm going to watch myself feel it at the same time and see what that is showing me about what I think or believe or how I identified. And that process over 5 years, I mean, it's been 5 years,
Mhm.
has annihilated me, who I thought I was,
Mm.
and returned me to the closest truth of who I've ever been. I'm sure life will annihilate me again at some point, but
Gosh,
I'm
that,
ready.
thank you for sharing, right? Thank you for sharing that part of the journey. I mean, you said what the shaman said, and I thought, my hand flew to my own chest, and I was just like, just breathe it in, Nina. It's the earth-shattering honesty, the
Mhm.
transparency that it transparency that is required for us to be able to own the truth of what is. We're being called into a new space. And you know what? Growth hurts. A lot of
Mm.
expansion is growing pains, right? It doesn't have to be suffering or, deadly, right? That's a whole nother thing. But growing pains are a real thing, right? And so I wish that it could always be like, like you just shed a skin and then you move on, right? But it's like, turns out shedding can be a little itchy and a little scratchy and, a little painful at times. And maybe it doesn't all come off very clear so that we can get to this fuller, whole self.
Yeah. I love that you use the word required, because the answer to how is that it is a requirement for you to go to the places that feel terrifying and scary, and the places you most don't want to go, and not to force yourself to go into them. They'll all unfold when they're ready. But I don't know a way out. And I don't know that I would choose one. I said to my teacher the other day, and I'm also in the sort of mid stages of a divorce with my husband. And so going through these really just excruciating moments where you're crying so hard, your actual physical heart in your chest hurts
Mm,
physically. And you think the grief is just going to kill you. And I went for a sunrise hike. I live in Colorado, so it's beautiful.
mm,
I was the only person out there. I was heading to my giant oak tree where I sit on the regular, and a bald eagle literally flew by almost eye height. And I was so overwhelmed with beauty. I mean, brought to tears by the absolute beauty of that moment. I sent my spiritual teacher a message and I said, if all I had to lose was everything to just experience this moment, then the price was too low.
mm.
And I believe that. One of my old business plan used to be just be the last woman standing. And I have a new line, which is
Very
learn.
powered.
Yeah. Yeah. And the new one is learn to appreciate the beauty of life and be annihilated by it at the same time.
Mm. Learn to appreciate the beauty of life and be annihilated by it at the same time. You say that, and I think of, first off, the first quote, which was so about the self, right? It's only us. We've got to make it, right? So survival based, right? Very powered to this. Right, I'm going to say more empowered space, more collaborative, more open, right? Space of I don't exist in a vacuum. Let me recognize that there is beauty out beyond me, and in fact that beauty in its many shapes and colors and forms, right, and some of which is ugly and maybe we won't define as beauty, but that which is beyond me and out of my control
Yeah.
may come back and affect me. It will annihilate me sometimes, and it may be for my bettering, right? That I wouldn't say it will be for the bettering, but right, if we can find that growth oriented space again, that it is for the bettering and that it is required. We cannot, right? I love how you said that. I don't know that I would find another way out, right? Don't know that I want a way out. We often say, right, the only way out is through. That is the way out. You have to go through the emotional landscape that's already there. You can't cut it out. You can't pretend it does. I mean, you can pretend it doesn't exist, but then we'll be talking about a whole episode on avoidance and coping skills that are maladaptive and, those things. But
Oh God, yes.
so
I know that definitely.
so
Ask us how we know.
oh yeah. Yes, yes. So anytime this comes up, this moment that we just ask us how, and it's like, can we just talk about emotional sobriety? Like, can we just talk
Yeah.
about what that really is, right? It's like you got to feel those feelings and they've got to move out and through you. Like, that's how they're designed. That's how we're designed. We're not designed to just hold on to it forever, right? It's not sustainable. So you have this, I think this is the great point to bring the sacred rage alchemy up, right? I think about in particular, right, the part of me that got stuck in my divorce, right, that I had to work through because I couldn't cut her out. I had to work through it. I had to get to know that part. I had to figure out what she was trying to tell me, right? But what she really held on to for me that was not integrated, right, wasn't wholly a part of me, she was holding on to my rage and my resentment. And I needed to feel them. I needed to feel them within me, to feel those things so that they could move out and through me. I want to hear, what is this for everybody out there who's saying, oh, yes, like I have it. I know that the feeling is there. I don't know how to process through it. Can you tell us about what you do with Sacred Rage Alchemy and how it even popped up to begin with, maybe?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things ever. And it's so mind-blowingly me and not at all about me at the same time. It's so very practically, it's a 3-hour session in person in Denver here, where I take people through what I call an embodied experience of rage, meaning it's not talk therapy. You are screaming, crying, drooling, like fully losing control. And
Mm.
it's gradual. So most people have you talk about spectrums, right? The spectrum of the way that people experience rage. On one end of the spectrum is a completely disassociated, repressed relationship with rage, where many people will tell me, I actually don't feel angry. I'm not an angry person. And I'll often reply with, okay, are you anxious? Yes. Do you have an absolutely vicious self-critic inside of your head? Yes. Do you get frustrated all the time? Yes. Are you overwhelmed? Yes. Are you frustrated? Yes. Are you a woman on planet Earth in 2023? Yes. Then you have rage. On the other end of the spectrum, and this current offering is only for women, so I'll talk about women, have a sort of unchecked relationship with rage where they're lashing out either verbally, sometimes physically. And then, of course, there are people who fall in the middle where they're aware of it, but they're afraid of it. Mm-hmm. Which basically all of them would describe me at some certain point in my journey, primarily the first end of the spectrum where I just didn't feel angry at all.
Yeah.
And I had done some work with rage with the shaman that I messaged before, but it was a year and a half ago. I was in a new container with my spiritual teacher, and I thought that I was going to be working through shame with her. Mm-hmm. We had about 4 sessions in, and it was a group, and it was so clear to me. Well, what happened was it was so minor, and this I think is really significant. I reached out to her ahead of the circle and I said, hey, I have this thing I really need support on. And typically when you would do that, you would get prioritized. Okay. For whatever divine reasons, she didn't. And person after person after person after person kept getting put in front of me until the call was over. And I was so caught off guard by the full embodied rage that could no longer be contained, that was from the past 36 years of my life. Okay, the earrings staying out. And she luckily is such a beautiful soul that she was like, bring it, bring the full wrath, go into full projection, give it to me all. And it was the first time, and it was very unconscious. It was all about her and everything she had done wrong in that moment. And to be witnessed, and then to watch her, the smile creeping up on her face while I was just unleashing my rage. And I've got a lot of power, so the rage is powerful. And she was just like almost like she was relaxing and soaking it in. It was like it was nourishing her as it was happening. And I finished, and she said, "Is there anything else?" Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, and by the way, and then at the end, because I had discharged that emotion, and then I sort of came back into awareness, I felt a little embarrassed. I felt vulnerable. I felt confused. I felt a little bit ashamed, but I also felt self-honor in a way I had never felt before. I felt empowered in a way that I had never felt before. And then she said something that changed my life forever. I was about to open my mouth to say something like, thank you so much. I'm sorry it came out this way, something like that. And she goes, don't you dare go into the good girl. And I was like, oh my, I devote my life to you, woman. And it was the beginning of a very sacred journey with what I call sacred holy rage. Yeah. So from there, I started to work with, well, not exactly from there. I did a lot more work myself, but I started to work with people in one-on-one sessions where I would bring them to Colorado. They'd fly in, we'd spend, 4 hours together, and I would just little by little start to repair the trust that they had with their rage and take on whatever role. So I'd antagonize them, I'd comfort them, I'd support them to go into this fully embodied rage. Because what I found is that rage is the most shamed emotion. In fact, for some people, just hearing that rage is an emotion will be an insight. We classify it as some sort of demonic entity that lives within us, this uncontrollable beast, where it's an emotion like frustration, sadness, a powerful one, but it's repressed for so long that we develop a fear-based, control-based relationship with it. And so we start to become afraid because we've got this enormously powerful beast locked inside of us that if you're really honest, you don't have control over. And so it feels like you've got to keep your life so small that this aspect doesn't get triggered. And of course, underneath it's protecting you from enormous grief and pain.
I hope everyone
But
just
when
heard
you
that. It's really important. It's protecting you from grief, and it's usually protecting you from something else. That's what anger and shades of anger are really good at.
and it knows the truth
Mhm.
about the way, air quotes, it should have gone, or you should have been treated, or how worthy you are, or how, excuse my language, bullshit it is what happened to you. And it's unapologetic. It is not protecting anyone but you, which is what makes it so scary. Because if it does come out unconsciously, it can be quite destructive. It can be quite harmful. It can physically and otherwise.
Mhm.
But when you learn how to fully embody it in partnership, the level of power that you reclaim, because it is you that you're repressing when you repress
Mhm.
shame, rage, is indescribable. And what I have found is that those who take this journey, whether with me or anybody else, is that unworthiness can almost disappear. I had clients come in who were suicidal that left like, never mind, like I could do this in one session.
I am
In
not
one
sad
session,
anymore.
people's inner critic disappears because rage repressed has to go somewhere. So we turn it on ourselves because we know we can take our own power and nobody else can, air quotes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I know that was a long answer to your question, but I can keep going, but I'll pause.
It was beautiful. Thank you so much. Right. There's something that you should just here at the end, right? And about power. I'm always saying, I've got it on shirts at this point, literally, like emotion is energy that must be expressed. If
Mm,
you don't express it, it will express you. That is
yes,
its job, is to protect you. And it will protect you even at your own expense to a point, right? Because it's really things short term. Emotions are not good at thinking long term. They really think short term. So when emotional thing that's triggered you in the present moment matches up and parallels with the 50,000 times it's happened previously that you've been invalidated in that similar way, that's the part of you that's coming out. It's not responding to just this one moment. It's responding to all the times that you have been invalidated in that way and that you still feel like you don't have control over. Some part of you still says, remember, we didn't have control over it the 47,000 times before this. You think this is different? Let's let them have it, right? Or whatever the case. It's using a blueprint that's like it's not responsive to this moment, but it's not good at thinking that way. When we integrate these parts, we can help bring online the other part. I mean, can I offer a psychoeducation bit here?
please.
There's this lovely connection that goes offline within us when we're triggered, right? And so there's two different parts of our brain. For those of y'all who are out there who are like, I like talking about the psychological bits, right? I'm going to oversimplify it, but there's two different parts of our brain that are essentially involved here. We've got amygdala, which houses all your emotions, right? It's like that's where all the emotions live. Their job is to respond to like stimuli in the environment. That's their job, like be the alarm system, right? Super helpful. Then you've got your prefrontal cortex, and your prefrontal cortex job is to do all the logical, rational thinking, right? It helps you with like your math and your decisions and prioritizing and all those things, right? And there's this like great highway between the two of them. And it's like, hey, we can make emotional decisions that are good for us. And we're thinking about the long term benefits, pros and cons, right? Until you get triggered and emotionally hijacked. That highway gets cut. And no longer do you have access to thinking logically about things if you're stuck in that emotionally hijacked state. So when you talk about being able to practice or gain skills and redefine that relationship with this emotion, it's so that you know how to intrinsically, because you have practiced this, rehearsed it, conditioned those muscles within you, right? Those emotional muscles to maintain that highway. You know what it is that needs to happen so that you can continue to honor and validate these feelings are real. Here's what they're trying to say. Here's what I need to give myself. And I'm not going to repress that anymore. This is real. Even an uncomfortable truth is still a truth.
Amen. Yes.
On that note, we are nearing the end of the episode. Okay. And I'm wondering, of all of the things that we've explored and the internal territory that we've explored, what are your takeaways from this episode?
Hmm. There's so many. It feels so, the word that comes up is nourishing.
Mm,
And why I say that is because if someone's lying to you and you know it, but they won't tell,
mm,
even if they're telling you a more convenient truth, but they're lying and you know it, you can't settle. You can't experience intimacy. You can't experience connection. You can't experience peace and presence.
mhm,
So, this conversation to me feels deeply nourishing because it is the truth. Is it a truth that is atypical in our culture to be so enthusiastic about? Maybe. But inconvenient for those who are either at the precipice of knowing that this is what their next step is, but still feel afraid? Definitely. And when we can let the truth be nourishing, no matter how uncomfortable it is, to me, nourishment and wholeness really go hand in hand. So to me, I feel deeply nourished by being with someone in conversation who is so in for what's real.
mm. Thank you for sharing that, and also for acknowledging my humanity in this part of this conversation. I think to reflect back and to share my own takeaways in this, one of the biggest things that I see people struggle with when they get to know me, or rather don't know me, but they know the idea of me, is that because I am so real, I am terrifying for some people.
Mm.
And it's not the real me, it's the idea of me that is so terrifying. Because when people get to know me, my closest friends will be like, Nina's the least scary person I know. You can be so vulnerable with her. She's so non judgmental, right? But you have to get over that idea of me in order to get to the real me. And so I think about that with our own fears. How can we move beyond the idea of the fear and really leaning to getting into know the reality of it, the real truth of it, which is that we can survive it. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, it might be sticky, and you will still survive it. Right. And I think this is an important distinction too, not just survive it, but when we can really, I think this is maybe my biggest takeaway, when you integrate these parts that are sticky and uncomfortable, when you reintegrate them and redefine your relationship to them, my rage is no longer something that takes a hold of me and runs my life and wrecks things for me. My rage now shows up, and I know you better act, Nina, because if you don't, she will hijack you. And you know, it's because something is invalidating your lived experience right now. Figure out how to make it valid. Figure out how to validate yourself in this moment,
Mm.
right? Is there anything else you want to share before I move into adventure challenges? And then we're going to do social stuff for sure too, because people are going to definitely want to know where to reach you. But is there anything
Yeah.
you want to share before I challenge our audience?
Yeah, I'll just share it. I was thinking about it. I love that I get the opportunity to share this. I was driving home from taking my daughter to school this morning, and I was thinking about how many excruciatingly uncomfortable conversations I had been in the last week,
Mhm.
how they were some of the most intimate moments in the last year.
Mm.
And so there's a place beyond the fear of experiencing these scary emotions, and it's the ability to feel intimacy always.
Oh my gosh. I don't think anyone has ever put it quite that way.
Mm.
The way that I have experienced this is I'm able to feel secure and like I belong everywhere I go. I'm able to feel that sense of vulnerability everywhere I go because I have cultivated it within me. You cannot take it from me. You can try, right? But it is something that is cultivated within me. But it is a sense of intimacy, which is so uncomfortable for other people, but we can carry it with us wherever we go.
Yeah. I mean, can you feel intimacy with a person who is angry at you in that moment? Can you feel intimacy while you and a colleague are having an enormous breakdown in connection? Can you feel intimacy in the middle of a divorce with your former husband? I mean, if we can feel in genuine intimacy, I'm not using semantics here. I'm talking about actual deep, deep love and intimacy.
Mhm.
To me, yeah, I use the word that I use when you say emotional sobriety is sovereignty.
Mm.
I'll say sovereignty is the only true safety.
Mm.
So when we feel that way, it's like, well, yeah, I can experience intimacy always. So then there's nothing I need to protect myself from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Damn, that's good. Thank you so much for sharing. I am going to give an adventure challenge out there to the audience. Y'all, there are so many golden nuggets that we are taking from this episode. I hope that you've had your journals out, that you have been taking notes, that you have been exploring things that have come up within you, that maybe felt really eager, right, as you listen to Vanessa and I speak here, or maybe felt like, oh, no, retracting, aversion. I don't know if I feel so good, right? Note all of that because it is a part of your emotional landscape, right? My adventure challenge to you all this upcoming week is the following. Because I come up with these on the spot, give me your grace, right? As I am feeling out what it feels most appropriate for my audience, right? With Vanessa here. We've been speaking about different emotions that are uncomfortable. In particular, we have focused on rage, right? A shade of anger for most of us. We've been focusing on that. And the question that we came to explore was how can we put the human back in human performance? So, my question to you, step number one, if you just want to explore some awareness, is this: what emotion might I need to redefine my relationship with? There are typically five that we look at: joy, anger, disgust, sadness, fear, right? Again, rage is one that we really focused on. So, my invitation, if you lean in and you say, hey, you guys spoke about rage, that would be the first question for you then. How can I redefine my relationship with rage? Do I even want to, right? That's just the first one, actually. Do I even want to? Okay, first question. Now you have awareness on it. If you're like, Nina, I know that I want to redefine my relationship with this emotion, give me my step two. If you want to lean in a little bit further, you're like, yes, I've decided I want to lean in to redefine this relationship. I want you to ask yourself, what kind of relationship do I presently have with my rage? Or fill in the blank emotion, right? That relationship might be like frenemies. It might be like a parent-child relationship. It might be like a victim and a captor relationship. What kind of relationship do you presently have with your rage? You're like, I don't know who it is at all. Is it like a distant cousin? Is it like a stranger? Does it pop out whenever it wants, right? Like, what kind of relationship do you have here? And if you're like, Nina, oh my gosh, I'm so ready for this now. What's my step number three? Y'all know I give you 3 levels. Ready for the last one. You've already said, yes, I want to redefine it. Yes, here's what the relationship is. Can you commit to making one move to flip the script on that relationship? Just one move to say, I want to redefine this relationship. I don't want it to be maybe victim captor if that's the case. I want to figure out how I can shift that. Maybe it's picking up a book. Maybe it's reaching out to Vanessa. Maybe it's reaching out to a therapist or a coach. Something that says, I just commit to keeping this at the front of my mind. I'm not going to put this under the rug anymore or hide it in the closet. I'm going to acknowledge that this is my truth and I am going to own it so it stops owning me. Yeah? Okay. Adventure challenge. It is out there. That's for y'all between this episode and the next, right? We've got a week between episodes, y'all. But Vanessa, I'm going to roll this ball back to you. People have got to know how they can reach you.
So you can find me on, vanessabrowerscoaching.com is my website. But if you go to thepowergift.com, it's a 52-minute audio. The power is an acronym. That is for me what it means to reclaim your power. It's one of my favorite things I've ever recorded. It also puts you on my email list, so you'll get all my emails. If you reach out to me directly from either of those places and you want 2 recordings that I have actually done at the beginning of my Sacred Rage Alchemy sessions, I'll send you them. They go deeper on rage. And then you can find me on Instagram at the High Performance Healer. That's the handle.
We will, of course, have all of that in the show notes for all of you. So you don't have to rewind. Just scroll down in the show notes, click the link that you want, screenshot whatever it is so that you have these resources. Yes, we are trying to, transform a culture here from powered to empowered, right? To really say, let's diversify the narrative. It is multifaceted. There's more than one way to explore courage, more than one way to explore healing. And I love that in this episode, I really feel like we even touched on how do you belong to yourself again, right? Belonging being that third pillar of an empowered human life. Vanessa, thank you so much for your energy and your spirit and your wisdom here today with us on Empowered Human. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for being willing to explore healing your humanity on Empowered Human. I hope you found at least one new way to transform your worldview from powered to empowered. If you took something from the show, please take a moment of your time and subscribe to Empowered Human. And if it really nourished you, leave us a review. Your feedback helps me understand what our community needs. Not to mention, it helps others discover the empowered human life. So keep this last bit in mind. All the visual goodies come with me on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina. Stay up to date there on upcoming episodes, behind the scenes goodness, and reels dropping knowledge. Thank you again for being part of the empowered human community. Until next time, stay curious.